Launch control room. How's the countdown going as far as Kepler is concerned?
It's going very well so far. We've had a great day today. The spacecraft has been powered on since early this morning, and all systems are go at this point. We have a team at Astrotech monitoring the health of the spacecraft, and another team in Boulder, Colorado at LASP also monitoring the spacecraft, preparing for launch.
Well, let's look now at some video of the spacecraft, of your processing history here at the Cape, getting ready to launch. And you can tell us something about what it took to get ready to fly, who all was involved, and how we got to this point and how you got out to the launch pad. So if we could go ahead and roll the tape.
So shortly after the first of the year, we shipped Kepler from Boulder, Colorado down to Astrotech here in Titusville, Florida. You can see the pictures here showing us unloading the spacecraft out of the large shipping container. We shipped down with 2 bags on the spacecraft to keep it clean. It was about a 4-day trip to get here from Boulder, Colorado. Here we are in the Astrotech clean room doing our checkout after shipment. We do powered on tests. We do a full inspection of the vehicle to make sure that there was no damage in shipment, and run functional tests. Here you can see the technicians testing the core sun sensors on the spacecraft. These are sensors that we use to help orient the spacecraft with respect to the sun. The silver part of the spacecraft is the part that's illuminated in the sun. You can also see gold blankets on the portions of the spacecraft. That's the part that stays on the colder or dark side. Very large fixed solar panels help keep the sun off the photometer during the mission. Here we are moving back onto our transporter cart for the short trip down to the fueling facility. Put bags on it again, and as you can see, the wind was blowing a little bit that day. Kepler is a tall vehicle. It stands over 15 feet tall. The spacecraft weighs about 2,200 pounds. Once in the fueling facility, we remove the protective bags and prepare to load the hydrazine into the fueling system. Kepler has a reaction control system that's used to control momentum during the mission, and it carries 13 kilograms of hydrazine. That's our high-gain antenna. Once every 30 days, we orient the spacecraft towards Earth and send the science data down to be analyzed to look for those transits you've been hearing about. Many of these operations where we lift the spacecraft are very delicate. We have a full team that watches every little corner, makes sure that we don't bump anything, and extra care is placed. That's the cold side of the spacecraft. You can see the radiator that keeps the CCDs cold. And we are getting ready to weigh the spacecraft. It was weighed to determine the precise weight to give to the launch vehicle folks to make sure that they could program the launch vehicle to put us safely in orbit. Following the weighing operation, we prepared to move over onto the stack, is what we call it. The third stage motor is to the left. It's a solid rocket. At this point, the ball technicians started working with the United Launch Alliance technicians as a team, and we've been working together since that time. There you can see the thrusters, 2 of the 8 thrusters on the spacecraft. You can also see the protective thermal blanket on the bottom of the spacecraft. In addition to the high-gain antenna, Kepler has 2 low-gain antennas that we use for commanding. We also do a health check with the vehicle every 4 days during the mission. Kepler's being set down on top of the third stage. There you can see the separation springs that sit between the third stage and Kepler. Tonight, once the third stage finishes its job, those springs will push Kepler away from the third stage and set us on our voyage. Next, we prepared for the trip out to the pad. It's a little ways to get from Titusville over to Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, so we put a protective can around the spacecraft. That's a transporter underneath it. Pulls behind a truck, similar to just a trailer. The can is built up in sections using the crane. All these operations are very delicate, considering how close the can comes to the very valuable spacecraft. Each section is carefully attached and sealed. Over 2,000 people have worked on Kepler in the facility in Boulder, Colorado, the Ball Aerospace facility. The Ball effort has involved over 1.3 million hours of labor to build this fine planet hunting machine. Kepler has very large optics. It has a 95 megapixel camera inside of it. Just for reference, a typical high-end camera in a camera store might have 8 megapixels. It's been quite a challenge to develop the camera to be able to observe the 100,000 stars. Here you see the top section of the can being carefully moved over the top of the spacecraft and then set in place. The white bag you see then slides down over the whole thing. We left the Astrotech facility approximately midnight. It's moved in the middle of the night because it's so tall. It's about 30 feet tall on that stack on the truck. Required careful maneuvering to get around overhead power lines and light poles. The entire trip to the pad took about 5.5 hours at 5 miles per hour. Once Kepler's on orbit, there'll be about 60 days that we use to check out both the spacecraft and the photometer. At that point, we go through all the systems, initially just the main spacecraft systems, and then we move into the photometer checkout. Here you can see us going past the Kennedy Visitor Center on our way towards the launch pad. Quite a convoy. Here we are going on to the air station. You can see a beautiful shot of the moon in the background. It was actually quite a windy night this night, and when we got out to the pad, here we are arriving at the pad, we were unable to put the spacecraft on top of the rocket that night, so we went back to a safe storage facility about 2 miles away. The next morning we tried again, and again the wind was blowing too high, so we had to try a third time, and finally we got up on the vehicle, where we sit tonight, ready to go and place Kepler into its orbit and begin its search for planets.
John, tell us, after we have spacecraft separation, which is at about 62 minutes after launch, and Kepler's on its own, what are the first things that are going to be happening with Kepler? What are the things that you'll be looking for the spacecraft to do and that tell you that it's okay?
Well, there's a couple things that we have to do. The very first thing is we have to establish a stable pointing. Although we expect the launch vehicle to give us a very good tip-off or a very smooth release, if by any chance we get any wobble at that point, we have to be able to compensate for that. There are reaction wheels on the spacecraft as well as thrusters, so we will use the reaction wheels and possibly the thrusters to help control the attitude of the spacecraft